Welcome to On Cooldown, the weekly WoW news show right here on Marcelian&Online. In today's episode, we have Operation Mechagon Nerfs. Bosses' abilities, damage dealt to players all scaled down a bit to make the dungeon more in tune with the rewards it's giving out. And the red punch card Cyclotronic Blast has received a nerf as well. The Mythic World Race is going strong and we have a lot of new players to the table. More streaming services. Rating has never been cooler for you, the viewer, unless you are playing in it, in which case you should be farming mana pearls by now. Hotfixes going around. Arcane mages have been buffed. Finally! Is it enough though? Well, if it isn't, we have other nerfs to make it look better. Essences and raid nerfs have steadily been happening over the course of last week. Classic stress test was postponed, the one on the global level. Why? Lastly, some PvP love showed to gear, at least where Azurite gear is concerned, and weekly PvP arena chest rewards. Also, Conflict of Strife changes. Welcome, you wonderful people, to the end of the week and the beginning of the weekend. Redundancy much? No matter. We've got some things to talk about this week, so I will leave you in the capable hands of my friend Orksenson. Zodrug. Starting the episode, let's check the Mechagon the dungeon. The general community perception has been that Mechagon is a difficult dungeon, at least way more difficult than the gear rewards suggest. Now, difficulty is a very personal thing, and it means different things for different people. Talking to some of you lovely viewers, I noticed that people who have managed to go as a pre-made group that can communicate had a much easier time, while those struggling to pug their way through, not so much. It's clear the mechanics are not meant to be easily handled by new players that are doing it in looking for a group. The dungeon is made to be a 5-man mini-raid, and fundamentally, any MMO group content is designed to be done with a group of people aiming for the same goal, clearing it, as opposed to pugs that quickly leave once shit hits the fan. Be that as it may, our opinions aside as well, Blizzard has proceeded to do nerfs across the board. Maybe across the board is stretching it, but multiple abilities, mobs and bosses have had their damage dealt scaled down. This seems to align with what the community, as a majority, have experienced. We haven't seen so many nerfs happen so quickly in a long time in one dungeon, possibly none at all in this entire expansion. And don't forget, you still have a hard mode for the dungeon. Alongside the nerfs to the actual dungeon, we have had our second nerf to the Cyclotronic Blast red punch card that you obtain in Mechagon, by getting the rep of course. When initially this baby came out, it was castable while you were still doing your rotation, which of course quickly changed to work as a proper castable ability into a channel, which is demanding on its own. Even with that, the punch card is still a very strong DPS trinket, and the recent nerf made it interruptible, which makes a lot of sense, probably because I actually didn't know it wasn't interruptible and always tried to cast it in a safe window. That just means the strength of the trinket hasn't changed, it's just a bit more difficult to pull off, which, to be honest, is not really that difficult anyway. I personally adored this trinket and love the fact that it's in the game. After I got my Ajara normal trinket though, I stopped using it, which sucks, but as far as the first few weeks of the expansion go, it was a very cool option that might still be very good for a lot of players in the weeks to come. Are you using the trinket? If so, what are your thoughts on it? Leave a comment down below. The Mythic Race started this week, and boy, do we ever have an interesting competition going. Method has been streaming the casted race on their end, with Red Bull covering other teams. The race is pretty tight, and there are a lot more contenders this time around that bring some excitement to the table, at least in a public sense. The strategies they apply are interesting, although there do seem to be some sort of consistency when it comes to their compositions. Affliction Warlocks and Shadow Priests seem to be stacked in one way or another, but what's more surprising is the occasional Retribution Paladin and Frost Decay. Method is taking names as to no one's surprise, with Limit very close behind. Other guilds, even from the Oceanic servers, have made their appearance a lot more prominently known, and it seems that casted and streamed raids are becoming more popular with each raid tier. Next up will be esports, am I right? There are most likely sponsorships deals going around, and the guilds are getting coverage for sure, but what we see now could very well be the beginning of a future esport. Competitive raiding has always been in the game, but once you make it in an entertainment show with an audience and commentators, it could start to become an esport, and frankly, that's very exciting. Moving on, a large amount of hotfixes happened this week, with one of the most exciting being a buff to arcane mages. God damn, finally! How long have you waited, I wonder? At least for 2 raid tiers, right? Arcane has been performing at the bottom of the logs, and that hasn't changed for the beginning of 8.2. Now, finally, things can change, because you have a 6% increase in your overall damage. What the fuck? Wait, please don't leave. I know your arcane spec has received as much love as I did in high school trying not to be awkward and being totally awkward instead. But listen, there are other things to be happy about. Examples. Essence of the Focusing Arrows has been nerfed. Oh, you're not playing a tank that loses aggro to this essence? Well, at least the 15% damage nerf to it isn't as demoralizing as a 6% damage buff to the arguably weakest spec in the game, because we all know that 6% damage buff to arcane isn't going to magically increase the overall output by 30% to be at least competitive with the other specs in the game. But the Essence of the Focusing Arrows has to be nerfed slightly. It was doing crazy damage, and although it was fun, 3 people firing their lasers would pretty much demolish any pack of mobs before their script even let them know they were dead. Blizzard left a note on this particular change saying that the number this baby was putting out was outshining the other options you could have by using other AoE essences. Fair enough, Blizzard. But what about arcane mages notes, huh? That's right, no notes here, moving on. You probably played against the new beguiling affix, which, as far as I was able to see, received mixed opinions. Some people love it, some people hate it. Regardless of their opinion, I think we can all agree that the change it received to the Void Emissary is for the better. If you don't know, the Void Emissary, once engaged, continuously casts an AoE spell that deals massive shadow damage and applies a debuff, which increases subsequent casts' damage on affected targets. And the debuff stacks, of course, meaning you could realistically take 2 casts to the face before you die, no matter what and how many cooldowns your healer uses. Previous to this change, the debuff was on the Emissary instead, increasing the damage she was doing regardless if you LOS the cast dodging its damage. Now you can actually play a hide and seek strategy to dodge the debuff or reset it, if you hide long enough for it to drop, which I cannot see being a valid strategy on higher keys. It was a bit too melee unfriendly before the change, and now everyone can either just burst it down or LOS some of the cast until the Emissary is taken down. A couple of changes have happened to the raid bosses as well. Besides the hotfixes where casts were not going out as intended, such as the add-on Radiance of Ajara buffing itself by way less than it should, we also have had changes such as Orgazoa Transition. Previously it switched platforms after 3.5 minutes, and now it switches once it reaches 40% HP to adjust to player item scaling, making the encounter skewed, to use the devs' words, and not play out as intended. Fair enough. Some fixes were added to Queen Ajara, such as beckoned players that were also targeted by Charged Spear, which are no longer targeted, something I can only imagine was not ever as intended. No other nerfs so far, and that's good to see, at least as far as the first week of the Mythic Race is concerned. Who knows what we will have next week. You can catch us stream various content such as the raid and mythic dungeons, testing out specs and stuff on twitch.tv/MarcelianOnline. Come by and say hi. On a shorter note, the classic WoW stress test has been postponed. It was supposed to be next week, and this is not the first time this has happened. The developers have received some info about it, but nothing very conclusive. All in all, the release date of the classic server has not been postponed yet. Their servers simply don't seem to be ready for a worldwide stress test, considering previous stress tests they did in the last few months. It's clear they are conscious about the stability, and maybe, just maybe, they are testing out a version with reduced sharding and need a bit more work on it, which would be amazing and definitely worth the wait. Although considering WoW Classic will be very crowded in terms of players and servers available, sharding may be necessary. Unless you want to spend 2 hours in a collect X from mobs quest area. Moving on to a more PvP focused piece. First, let's start with probably the biggest change since late winter last season. Resto Druids have received an overall 10% nerf to their healing done. We haven't, however, received details as to what this 10% applies to. Is it an overall character hidden aura that decreases throughput? Or are specific abilities nerfed in such a way that the overall performance has been reduced by 10%? Whatever the case may be, Resto Druids have dominated the healer meta last season, and the reasoning behind the nerfs are, as you might have expected, fairly obvious, and arguably obvious since the very onset of the mana nerfs from last season. Players already knew that Druids would be very strong due to their utility toolkit and their undisputed ability to go out of combat and regen mana in an era where mana regen has been nerfed across the board, making some healers too weak to be even considered for a situational pick. On top of all that, Resto Druids simply had a much larger throughput through their heals, again something most people knew going into the Resto Druid meta, and most likely something known to Blizzard as well. The changes didn't happen earlier, not because Blizzard wasn't aware of the meta, but because the AWC was going on strong, and making big changes on top of what they already did would have messed up the teams competing in a big way, not to mention repercussions for us ladder grinding folk. From an esports and competitive perspective, it was the right call. However, it ended up making a lot of players switch their mains, which is one thing, but also forced a lot of people to either switch to something they didn't like or not be able to properly play at all, since their main spec, discipline, was pretty much dead in the water. The game has been going on for over a decade, and you would hope in 2019 we could have proper game balancing where we won't have 5 of the 6 healing specs being suboptimal, with 1 or 2 of them having niche usages. That's not cool for a competitive side of the game, and the balancing issues extend outside healers as well. Looking at you, Unholy DKs. Would have said distro locks, but hey, they did start receiving nerfs once 8.2 was released. I love doing arenas, but I'm still an amateur. However, I still want to tune into AWC and see something other than Resto Druids, Unholy DKs and such. It's difficult balancing the game, and there will always be certain specs stronger than others, and we can only hope the balancing team will take a few more risks when making the game more interesting in the future. On another note, let's talk gear. No, not PvP vendors, come on. This is not Christmas in July.
Christmas in July? July?
It's actually July. Oh, what were the odds? The joke matched. But instead, there have been some clarifications to the weekly PvP chest, essentially the counterpart of the Mythic Plus chest, where, again, I feel like the gladiators of the arena aren't getting gear catered to their skill level, which in my humble opinion should be Mythic rating level gear. And I'm talking here about the cream of the crop, not Noob Flame playing Flavor of the Month, Resto Druid, and Unholy Decay, despite his meta rambling 1 minute ago. Oh, the eye level is on par with the Mythic rating? So my argument is pointless? The gear eye level rewards will match your rating bracket as long as you actually won a ranked match in that rank bracket. As an example, if you're a gladiator, then boost me. No, that's not it. If you're a gladiator, help me get the mount. No, just read the damn script, man. If you're a gladiator, you should receive a 445 eye level reward from your weekly cash as long as you won a match at that rating. If you just got promoted from duelist and haven't yet won a ranked match in the glad bracket, you'll get a 440 duelist eye level reward. Or if you haven't won any rank matches in the last week, regardless of your rating, you'll get a 415 unranked eye level reward. Is this enough to please the PvPers that wanted gear vendors? I hope so, because this is all you have at the moment. Sorry, lol, haha. PvP what? Am I right? Haha, I'm just kidding. But Conflict and Strife, the PvP talent essence, has received some changes to its source as well. By changes, I mean the bug where you had over 1k rating and got rank 1 instead of rank 2, which the 1k rating should offer you. The same way you get rank 2 essence of the Focusing Iris if you finish a +7 or higher in time, completely skipping the rank 1. People who have not received this posted the question, which Blizzard answered, that it was indeed a bug and should be fixed now. Depending on when you opened your chest, you might have actually missed the fix, because the best the devs could do is to tell you to not open the chest while they fix it. I suppose that's fair, but I would find it fairer if they could just award the rank 2 via GM tickets or something, so that players who were too eager to check their weekly rewards can also get it without waiting another week. But hey, life's not fair, and with this philosophy we never have to complain ever again. That's right, arcane mages, suck it and switch to fire because nobody cares. Blizzard cares, just a little bit. They care 6%. If you like our weekly news segment where we go over the happenings of WoW, sprinkled a little bit with some cringy humor, then you should check all of our past videos. Yes, all of them. It's good for you. Shout out to our Patreons. You guys keep coming and we appreciate each and every one of you for all of the support you've been offering. If you, dear viewer, also want to become part of our Patreon team and get the little goodies on the side, check the details down in the description of the video. What's that? There's an extra link? That's right, we have merch. MarcelianOnline and WoW branded. Get your t-shirts, tank tops, hoodies, mugs, all down in our official Teespring link down below the video. Thanks for watching the video and have an awesome weekend.